3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time, we walked through the blackmail theory. Today, we are following institutional failure through the documentary record, so the timeline, decisions, and institutional failures are clear. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So start with how systems failed. That is where the paper trail becomes specific and testable.
And we should be very clear about the parameters for this. When we say institutional failure, it's often, a sort of shorthand for incompetence.
Right. A guard fell asleep. A camera just happened to break.
Exactly. It's treated as random, chaotic. But in a forensic audit, we're looking for patterns. Incompetence doesn't usually create a pattern. And what we see in the pinpoint database, specifically these EFTA documents from the DOJ, it is the opposite of chaos.
How so?
It's a series of deviations. Deviations from protocol that are so consistent, so mutually reinforcing that they stop looking like accidents. They start looking like operational decisions.
That's the distinction. We're not looking for mistakes. We're auditing decisions. And to do that, we have to start at the Metropolitan Correctional Center, the MCC. The most basic function of a prison is keeping inmates alive and knowing where they are. This is the custody audit. I'm pulling up document EFT 000016912.
This is the baseline. It deals with the counts. Now, we need to explain what a count actually is. It isn't just a quick head count.
It's not a roll call.
No, a count is the literal heartbeat of a secure facility. It is a physical, visual verification. The officer is required to go to the cell, look inside, see the inmate.
See them breathing.
Confirm it's not a dummy under the blanket, and then mark that specific time in the log. It's non-negotiable. If the count is wrong, the prison is, by definition, not functioning.
And document EFT 000017912 states, and this is the direct phrase.
It says the officers failed to complete their duties.
Now, that sounds like standard bureaucratic language. A skeptic might hear that and just think, okay, overworked guards, underpaid, maybe they were in the break room. Is that a conspiracy or just a staffing problem?
And if we only had that one sentence, I'd probably agree. Laziness is a common variable. But that's not all we have. We have the corroborating document, EFTA 0027307.
This is where it shifts.
This is where the language of the audit shifts from simple negligence to outright fraud.
Because this one details the logbooks themselves.
Correct. EFTA 000007307 notes the officers failed to conduct institutional counts, but then it adds the critical finding. There was an attempt to conceal their failure.
Conceal their failure? That's an action. It's not passive.
It's an affirmative act. If you're lazy, you leave the log blank. You forget. But if you sit down at your desk and you write all clear, inmate verified at 12:00 a.m., then all clear verified at 1 a.m. when you never left your seat.
That's falsification of a federal record.
That takes intent. It takes energy. You're creating a false paper reality to mask the actual reality of what's happening or not happening on that cell block. The log was falsified.
So on paper, the official record says everything is fine, he's being watched, he's safe. But in reality, no one has laid eyes on him for hours.
For hours. The record that would have been presented had he survived was a complete fabrication, not a lie of omission, a constructed lie.
And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. It's not just the guards. Let's look at the building itself. I'm looking at document EFTA 0000465. This is the log for the Institution Public Address System.
Which at first sounds, irrelevant, the PA system.
Who cares if the PA system is on the fritz? But look at the timestamps.
You have to synchronize the failures. The document cites a system malfunction at critical timeline markers, specifically marker number 5 and marker 6.3. The PA system is part of the command and control structure of the facility.
It's how you signal an alarm, how you coordinate a response.
Exactly. So if you have a system malfunction logged in the afternoon and then more failures logged through the night, you're establishing a pattern of infrastructure collapse.
So the building itself is falling apart at the exact same time the guards decide to stop doing their jobs.
And yet, this is the key discrepancy, the audit flags. Despite the documented failure to physically check the prisoners, per E-paid-in 000017912, and despite the PA system malfunction, The timeline shows a clear institutional count was announced at 10:38 p.m.
10:38 p.m. The system is broken, the guards aren't checking, but an announcement goes out facility-wide saying, all clear.
It is a procedural impossibility. How can you announce a clear institutional count when you have documented proof that the officers failed to conduct the count?
You're announcing a fiction.
The record shows the institution declared a state of normalcy at the precise moment its internal protocols had completely disintegrated.
Let's layer in the medical side of this, because another argument could be, well, he was in distress and it was missed. We have document EFTA 000193348. This is the medical log from just before the incident.
The intake and monitoring log, and it states very clearly that Epstein denied any respiratory problems.
He denied it himself. It's self-reported.
Which seems minor, but in a reconstruction it's critical. It establishes his baseline physical state. He wasn't reporting any distress, no chest pains, no wheezing. He self-reported as physically stable.
Okay. So we have a physically stable subject, falsified counts, a glitching PA system. But this next part, this is the one that's hardest to explain away as a coincidence. Document EFTA 00015361. The backup failure.
This is probably the most statistically improbable element of the entire infrastructure audit. We know from other reporting, source number 6258, that there were issues with the primary cameras, old cameras, broken wire.
Sure, government equipment fails. That happens.
But EFT 0000015361 discusses a technical error. And this is crucial. It was found on the backup system.
And we need to be clear about what that means. Security systems have redundancy. You have camera A, and if camera A fails, you have server B that's recording the data.
Correct. The whole point of a backup system is that it operates independently. If the camera breaks, the hard drive should still record static. If the hard drive dies, the camera feed should still be live somewhere. The probability of one system failing is low, but you can calculate it.
But both at the same time.
The probability of a backup system failing from a vague technical error in the exact same time window as the primary failure, which is also concurrent with the human failure to follow protocol. You're looking at a statistical anomaly so great it's hard to attribute to chance.
And the document just says technical error, not unplugged, not damaged.
It's a passive description for a catastrophic loss of the only remaining data. The document doesn't specify the cause, only the result. And the result was that the one system designed to work when everything else fails also failed.
So the forensic conclusion for this first block, the MCC audit, is that these aren't isolated incidents. You can't separate the falsified log from the broken PA from the backup error.
No. In an audit, this is what we call a cluster. It's a repeatable pattern of infrastructure and personnel failure occurring simultaneously. When you see your people deviating from protocol at the same time your technology fails, that is a massive red flag. It suggests either coordination or a systemic collapse so total the facility was effectively blind and deaf.
The prison was turned off.
In terms of security, yes.
So inside the MCC, total system failure. But this jail is overseen by the Department of Justice. And when we look at how the DOJ and the FBI were managing the world outside the jail, specifically the victims, we see an identical pattern.
A pattern of silence.
We have to move to evidence block 2, the victim notification failure.
This brings us to the Crime Victims' Rights Act, the CVRA. This is not a guideline. It's not a suggestion. It is federal law.
It mandates that victims of federal crimes have to be notified about proceedings, about plea deals, any major development.
It's so they aren't blindsided. So they have a voice. And document EFTA 02335898 is a difficult read because it audits the violation of this act. It looks at the government's alleged failure to confer with victims.
And the phrasing here is really specific. It says the government had a motive for hiding its error about the investigation's timeline.
That is extremely strong language for a government audit. It's not administrative oversight. It's not a communication breakdown.
Motive for hiding implies intent. It suggests that not telling the victims wasn't an accident. They didn't just forget to send the letters.
It suggests they were kept in the dark because if they had been notified, it would have revealed something about the timeline the government wanted to keep suppressed.
And if you notify the victims, what happens?
They get lawyers. They file motions in court. They object to deals. They create a public record. By violating the CVRA, by keeping them silent, the government maintained total control of the narrative and the timeline. EFTA 02335898 indicates that this is a strategic choice.
There was a gap, a long silence where legally there should have been communication.
And that silence is a form of institutional protection. It's a buffer zone.
Which brings us to document EFTA 000067776. This one mentions disclosure gaps. It says explicitly the government's failure to disclose all its victims were to be told. But then, look at what happens on the page.
It gets visually interesting. The text reads, FBI agents who, and then the specific action is just redacted, blacked out.
So the document admits there was a failure to disclose. It identifies FBI agents as the ones responsible, but it physically hides what they did.
We know who did it, a category of person, FBI agents, but we're not allowed to know what they did. And we have to correlate that with document EFTA App 00021553. This is what I call the few pages anomaly. For me, this is one of the most procedurally damning documents in the entire database.
Explain this. It's about FBI 302s.
The 302 is an FBI agent's official report of an interview. In any major federal case, especially one this complex, you generate thousands of pages of these. It's the institutional memory. If it's not in the 302, legally, it didn't happen.
In a case like this, with decades of allegations, international travel, you'd expect boxes of them. Filing cabinets.
Thousands and thousands of pages. But EFT 1000021553 references the FBI 302s, and it notes they should be only a few pages.
A few pages. For a multi-decade international trafficking investigation.
It is logically inconsistent with the scope of the alleged crimes. It implies one of two things. Option A, the FBI just didn't interview anyone of substance.
Which seems deeply unlikely.
Or option B, they conducted the interviews, but they chose not to file the 302s. They chose not to create the permanent discoverable record.
So it minimizes the paper trail. A defense attorney can't request a document that was never created.
That's the procedural logic. If you want to suffocate an investigation without officially closing it, you stop generating the paperwork. The few pages anomaly suggests a deliberate minimization of the investigative footprint.
Which brings us to the legal architecture that allowed all this to happen in the first place. The non-prosecution agreement, the NPA. This is our third block of evidence.
The NPA is the foundation of the impunity. And we have document EFTA 000225546, which analyzes the specific language. It points to the U.S. Attorney's Office and its failure to discharge its duties.
And the document is careful to say the NPA is not intended to imply institutional endorsement, but functionally.
Functionally, it was a complete institutional shield. It provided total protection, and it contains a key clause. Unless Epstein failed to comply. That's the government's escape hatch. The deal is only valid as long as he follows the rules.
It's a contract. You behave, we don't prosecute you. But if you break the rules...
The deal is off. That's standard. But the forensic question the documents raise is simple. Did he fail to comply?
And the record is clear. He did. There's evidence of continued criminal activity long after the deal was signed.
So the condition for nullifying the agreement was met. The government had the right, really the duty, to tear up that NPA and prosecute him fully. But they didn't.
That's an active decision.
It is a failure to discharge their duty. They failed to enforce the contract they themselves wrote.
So while the NPA didn't explicitly say institutional endorsement, their inaction, it functionally endorsed him by letting him keep the deal even after he broke it.
And while that legal shield was in place, very real things were happening. We can cross-reference with source number 5802, the URR NYC source. It discusses Ghislaine Maxwell.
And it contains a very specific allegation that Maxwell threatened to kill victims who were trying to report the abuse.
Now connect that back to the CVRA violation. It creates this horrific feedback loop. The DOJ is failing to confer with victims, so they're isolated. The FBI is minimizing the interview records, so their stories don't officially exist. And in that institutional silence, you have co-conspirators allegedly issuing death threats to maintain that silence.
The institutions stayed silent while the threats were active.
Which documents a deliberate protection of the status quo over the safety of victims and witnesses. The system chose to protect the agreement over protecting the people.
We need to zoom out now. We've looked at the jail, the DOJ. But Epstein operated in the world of high finance. We have to follow the money. This is evidence block 4, the Institution 1 connection.
The documents consistently refer to Institution 1. Based on the context in EFTA 0000287885 and EFT 0000155532, this is a major financial entity. The text notes significant ties to financial institutions and actors.
And it tracks a specific communication, 12:02 p.m. from the same corporate number.
This shows deep integration. He wasn't just a client with a checking account. He was using the corporate infrastructure. EFT 0000010819 references an independent equity research and corporate access firm. It talks about institutional sales trader logs.
Corporate access firm. What does that mean in this context?
It means exactly what it sounds like. Corporate access is a service that big banks provide. You pay them, and they put you in a room with CEOs, with institutional investors, with decision makers. They are vouching for you. The logs show he was using these networks to move funds and likely people.
And the FBI was aware of this. Document EFT 000015215 uses the phrase institutional knowledge.
By using institutional knowledge, the FBI can. And the rest is methodology. But the admission is right there. The FBI had knowledge of these networks. They knew about the corporate access firms. They knew about Institution 1. They knew how the machinery worked.
But could the banks claim they didn't know? The defense is always, he was just a client. Compliance missed it.
Document EFTA ATOT 00026428 answers that. It states that the network warned financial institutions. It specifically mentions hiring practices and corporate associate tracks.
So there was an alert. The financial sector was warned.
Yes. The record shows a warning went out about the network's hiring practices, which we know involved recruiting young women. And yet, the accounts stayed open. The corporate access continued.
And if you're a bank and you get a warning like that about a known sex offender, your compliance department is legally obligated to file a suspicious activity report, a SAR, and likely close the accounts.
But they didn't. The business relationship continued. That's a decision. They weighed the risk of the hiring practices against the profit from the institutional sales trader activity, and the profit won.
This brings us to more recent material. The Maxwell transcripts from 2025. This is evidence block 5. They're redacted, but what's left is very telling.
We're looking at the transcript from July 24th, 2025. There's a quote. And they were busy dealing with their own problems.
Who is they?
Well, the surrounding text has references to corporate and failure. The next day's transcript has a specific mention of the FBI.
And the word institutions.
When you analyze these fragments, you see a defense strategy emerging. It's mutual implication. The defense is arguing that they, the FBI, the corporations, were too compromised by their own problems to act.
It sounds like she's saying, don't look at me, look at them. They had problems too.
It's a version of the gray male defense. Prosecute me and I'll expose your institutional failures. And that sentiment, that idea of total system failure, is actually codified in document EFTA 00019994. It's a quote directly from the discovery files.
Read it.
The system failed the victims, failed the court, failed everyone.
And failed is capitalized.
Capital F, which in legal text is unusual unless it's a defined term. Here it reads like an admission. This isn't a journalist saying it. This is from inside the case files, the system admitting its own collapse.
We've covered a lot of what's in the documents, but a true audit also has to account for what's missing. Evidence block 6, the unresolved gaps.
The most obvious gap is the video. We already discussed the backup failure at the MCC, but then we have source number 6258, which reports the FBI refuses to return security camera footage.
So let me get this straight. The primary camera system at the jail malfunctions. The backup system has a technical error. And for any footage that might still exist from other angles or times, the FBI is refusing to release it.
That is the recorded discrepancy. A primary failure, a backup failure, and an institutional refusal to release any extant data. It creates an information black hole.
And it wasn't a matter of resources. Other reports show the FBI pouring thousands of hours into other cases.
Exactly. The resources were there. They just weren't allocated here. Instead, what we see documented is a failure to guard and a failure to disclose.
A failure to challenge the validity of the NPA.
They had the lawyers and the agents. They chose not to deploy them here.
Which leads to the final unknown. Document OEFT B000019750.
This one is, frustrating. Failure to attend and produce any corporate resolutions. This refers to subpoenas.
The government issued subpoenas to these corporations we talked about, telling them to produce their records, board meeting minutes, resolutions.
And the corporations just failed to attend and produce.
So what happened? Contempt charges? Did the FBI raid their offices?
The recording shows nothing. It's a documented gap where a corporate entity refused to comply with a subpoena and the system failed to compel them. In a normal case, you'd go to jail for that. Here, it's just a note in a file.
So let's synthesize. We've gone through the jail, the DOJ, the banks. Let's list the summary of findings.
The documented falsification of jail logs. EFT 0000079112.
2. Documented technical failures of both primary and backup security systems. EFT 0000345565.
3. Documented violations of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. EFTA 02335898.
And 4. Documented internal admissions that the system failed. With a capital F, EFTA 00019994.
These aren't theories. These are document numbers in a federal database.
So what's the takeaway? The so what?
These are not a string of accidents. They are identifiable decision points. Someone decided not to do the count. Someone decided to falsify the log. Someone decided not to notify the victims. Someone decided not to enforce a subpoena.
And that institutional knowledge mentioned in EFTA 0000152219.
The forensic record suggests that knowledge was used not to prosecute, but to manage the fallout, to contain the problem, not to solve it.
Which brings us to our final thought, a question for you to consider.
If the system malfunction, the technology and the human failure, the guards happen at the exact same moment.
And the backup drive, the one failsafe, has a technical error at that same moment.
Is that a statistical anomaly? Or is that an operational success for the people protected by the non-prosecution agreement?
Next time, the Clinton Connection.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.